ready? Okay. Good evening and welcome to the June 22nd, 2021 regular meeting of the City of Troy Planning Commission. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission. State law establishes planning commissions. The Planning Commission is comprised of 9 residents appointed to serve our community. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by City Council. Other individuals participating in the meeting include representatives from the city's planning department, city attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman Associates. If you wish to address the Planning Commission, please come forward to the lectern when recognized and provide your name and address on the sign-in sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name and address for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission, not to anyone else in the room. If you have a cell phone or any other device that might disrupt this meeting, please either switch it to silent mode or turn it off. At this time, I'd like the Planning Commission Secretary to conduct the roll call.
Mr. Faison?
Here.
Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krent?
Here.
Mr. Lambert?
Here.
Ms. Malala Holly? Here. Ms. Parakis?
Here.
Mr. Rahman?
Here.
Mr. Roush?
Here.
Mr. Tagle?
Here.
Next item on the agenda is extension of the Planning Commission bylaws. We're going to allow, I need a resolution to allow for comments made, our rules say in person, but we can make allow comments to be made by the public through the Zoom platform, email, or phone messages. Could I have a resolution for that, please? Mr. Lambert? Second?
I support.
Mr. Faison? Roll call, please.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Roush?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Next item is approval of tonight's agenda. May I have a motion to approve tonight's? Ms. Parakis? And second? Yes. Mr. Tagle? A roll call, please.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Roush?
Yes.
Affirmative, no?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Roush. Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Next item on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes from June 8th.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Mr. Roush approves. Second, Ms. Malala Holly. A roll call, please.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Roush?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comment for items that are not on tonight's agenda. Any comments from the public tonight for items not on the agenda? Seeing none, do we have any emails or voice messages or Zoom connections with comments that are not on the agenda?
Waiting for Jackie to respond.
Okay. Connections?
No, we do not, Mr. Krent.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is preliminary site plan review.
No, we do not, Mr. Krent.
Yep, I got you. Loud and clear. File number SP 2020-0006, proposed Shallowbrook Townhomes, east side of Rochester, south of Shallowdale, 88-20-14-152-001 and 88-20-14-301-031, Section 14, currently zoned RT, one family attached residential, zoning district controlled by conditional zoning rezoning agreement. Who's going to give us?
I will, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you,
Good
Mr.
evening.
Carlisle.
Tonight before you is a proposed 32-unit site condominium project. The subject site is approximately 4 acres. It's located on the east side of Rochester, north of Wattles to south of Shallowdale. If the Planning Commission remembers, this property was rezoned. It was conditionally rezoned recently by the City Council. It was considered by the Planning Commission approximately a year and a half ago, but delays due to COVID to get to the Council. But the Council recently rezoned the property to RT from partly R1C, single-family residential, and EP, environmental protection. There were conditions as part of the rezoning, and those are detailed. I will detail those in the presentation. With regards to the surrounding land use and zoning, the site is surrounded by single-family zoning and uses to both the north, the east, and the west. To the south is RT, one-family residential attached, as well as attached single-family. This was a focus and something that the Planning Commission looked at and the ultimate City Council discussed as part of the rezoning was the surrounding and adjacent land uses. The applicant, as noted, is requesting a 32-unit single-family attached condominium project. The 32 units are arranged in 8 buildings. The largest is 5 units each, and the smallest is 3 units. The proposed use is a permitted use in the zoning district, and all the units will be accessed off a private driveway off of Rochester Road. As noted, there's only one access point off Rochester Road. There are 12 units that are clustered just north of the main access drive, and the remaining 20 units are located south of the access drive. We do find that the arrangement does provide for adequate circulation, both for vehicular, emergency, and pedestrian access. With regards to the bulk standards of the RT district, it does comply with all the bulk standards except for the conditional rezoning requirements along the north buffer, and I'll talk about that more in a second. That's not compliant, but every other requirement of the RT has been met. So as I noted, there were 12 conditions that were placed upon the rezoning. Again, these are voluntary conditions offered by the applicant that's going through the process, and they're ultimately codified by the City Council in the rezoning agreement. They have met 8 of the 12 conditions as part of this site plan. So there are 4 conditions they did not meet. The first was, as part of the conditional rezoning agreement, there was to be a 35-foot buffer along the northern property line. You can see at the closest point, it's only 34 feet 6 inches. So obviously the applicant is deficient in 6 inches. The second issue that they were not compliant with is regards to screening along the southern property line. They were to provide 250 feet of screening. They've provided only approximately 210 feet, so they're required to plant 4 additional trees along that southern property line. The third condition that was not met is the applicant was required to provide 9 guest parking spaces. The applicants only provide 7. They're located in the central part of the site, and so they're asked to provide 2 additional guest parking spaces. And lastly, was with regard to materials. Materials were a lengthy discussion at the Planning Commission level and ultimately the City Council. The applicant offered that they would provide a durable, low-maintenance material, including brick, asphalt shingles, and plank siding. We find this condition has not been met. The applicant, in the areas outlined in red, are using an EFIS material, which we don't find to be a durable or really a quality material in this particular location. And so we are requesting that that material get swapped out with a more durable material. These are just a few slides of the different elevations and renderings. This is the elevation of the 3-unit building from the front, the rear of this, in both sides. This is a rendering at street level of the kind of the front activation, front doors. And this is a rendering more bird's eye looking at the back of the buildings in the garages. Sorry, this is another bird's eye view of the front buildings. So outside those 4 issues that we noted, they do meet every other requirement, including density, bulk, lighting, landscape, and elevations. We had a conversation with the applicant earlier today addressing these 4 issues. They did note that they will comply with all 4, and they're here to discuss that tonight. With all that being said, we are recommending approval with the conditions I noted above, including providing an open space easement, provide the required materials, 2 additional guest parking spaces, 4 additional trees along the southern property line, as well as increase the setback along the northern property line to 35 feet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions for, go ahead, Mr. Hudson.
Mr. Carlisle, it's been a long time since we've seen this, but what's the square footage of each of these units?
I'll have to look at the plans. Just give me a second.
Okay.
Any other? Go ahead, Mr. Payson.
So, Mr. Carlisle, if the 4 conditions are met, is this then a by right development per the conditional rezoning?
Yes, since this is a conditional, since it was a conditional rezoning, so now they're going through the site plan process. They meet all the requirements and standards of the zoning ordinance. It is a by right development.
Okay, thank you. And then you also mentioned there were 4 conditions that weren't met, but there's 5.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The open space easement was in there, and all it said was that was required as part of final site plan. So I didn't consider it as part of the 4 that weren't met. It will have to be met, and it will have to go through full legal review as part of the final site plan submittal.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Mr. Roush.
Mr. Carlisle, do you know how they got from the Exhibit B that was part of the conditional rezoning to the present site plan? In other words, I don't know if you noticed, the Exhibit B site plan that was utilized for the conditional rezoning has a slightly different layout than this one. Do you know how they got from one to the other?
The Planning Commission spent a lot of time discussing the layout, and I think the biggest difference is from the Exhibit B. I don't have a screenshot of the Exhibit B.
Right there.
That's
That's the difference. That's the difference.
was the reorientation of the.
Yeah, on the southern boundary, they oriented the building parallel to Rochester Road on the western side, as opposed to the southern boundary orientation.
Yeah, and I can't tell you why they did that, but from a site plan standpoint, I think it actually lays out better because it reduces the impact and the visualization of just the driveways and the garage doors. You actually see the front of the buildings.
Okay, so the concern that I have, though, was raised by the city council, I guess, as I've kind of extrapolated from their item number 8 and 11. 8 and 11 dealt with the, one of which dealt with the northern building. On the opposite end, on the north end, the buildings must have been proposed to be oriented in a similar fashion as they are on the southern end, because the one requirement was to turn the building that was closest to Rochester Road parallel to the northern boundary, so that the driveway wouldn't, the lights wouldn't shine into the buildings on the north.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, on Exhibit B, they had the building on the southern end so that the lights from the driveway wouldn't shine into the buildings on the southern boundary. And given that that was apparently a concern at some point, that issue was addressed, would it be reasonable to make a request that they accomplish the same objective on the southern boundary?
Well, I think there perhaps is a better way to accomplish it with either increased screening and or a screen wall or something of that nature. If you look at the screen above, there already is a pretty thick existing vegetation that exists at this location here. They're doubling it by putting those row of arborvitae on their property line here. What the concern is, Mr. Rauch, is if you move the building back to how it was before, you now have the straight view in of just pure garages and driveways. I think from a screening standpoint to the site, this lays out a much better orientation to Rochester than the previous version. So if your concern is headlights into this property, I think a better way to achieve it would be either through screening or walls.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts before we move on to the applicant? Seeing none, would the applicant like to come up and describe their project? Is the applicant in the room? Oh, good.
Good evening. I'm Arthi Mangla with Premium Development Group, and we're here to develop the Shallowdale Townhome project. I just wanted to take a quick minute and introduce myself, and thank you all for the opportunity to be here tonight. We're actually really looking forward to continuing our work with the city as well as the neighbors in order to deliver a product and a project that's well received by the community. Thank you for your questions. We're going to get into detail on all of your questions that were raised this evening.
Good evening. My name is Joe Latozis with Design House Architecture, 3300 Auburn Road, Auburn Hills, Michigan. Thank you for having us this evening. It's exciting to be back in front of a planning commission. It's been quite a while. We got used to the whole Zoom thing. But yeah, we are very excited to bring this project in front of you. We've been working on it quite a while with the whole team. And we're excited to bring it to the community and get this product out there. We think it's a product that fits well with the demographic of the area. It's something that seems to be a well sought after product. As the presentation was extremely thorough, kind of hit on all the points. We did discuss today earlier the 4 items, the materials, the additional screening at the southern border, the 35-foot buffer, and the additional parking spaces, and we are more than willing to accommodate all those items. We're going to remove the idea of the EFIS material from the facade. In lieu of that, we're going to do a smooth panel and trim system, something I've used in multiple other residential projects similar to this. It's very attractive. It's long-lasting. The paint or the finish lasts 20-plus years. So I think that falls within the criteria of the durable material. That's a fiber cement-based product. The additional 4 trees on the southern property line to increase that buffer. I think that helps with the concern of those headlights kind of shining south over that property line. Between what we're proposing and the existing screening that's present, I think that will block any headlights that do happen to go in that direction. The 35-foot buffer is easily achieved. We'll pull the building back 6 inches. It's not a problem. There's more than enough room to accommodate that. And then the additional guest visitor parking, we will gladly add 2 more spaces. That's definitely not a problem. So we are here to answer any questions that you have or any concerns, and hope to.
Ms. Barakis.
Yeah, thank you very much. I happen to really like this project a lot. I think it's really attractive. Could you point out where the guest parking is right now and where you're going to add the spots?
Yep, so currently, if you pull in off of Rochester Road and go immediately left, there is a group of parking spaces there. Adjacent to that is the mailbox area, so we thought that was a nice location for that, where people could come in, pause, grab their mail, go on. Or if visitors came and they weren't being able to be accommodated behind the garages of each unit, that was kind of a centralized location. The additional 2 parking spaces we would propose would either be adjacent to there or possibly in the southern cluster, that adding the 2 spaces in that area might be beneficial for, if visitors come to someone down there. But we will work with staff to find the perfect location for those and make sure that they.
So in front of all the buildings, all those lines, are those all parking spots?
Correct. So every unit would have 2 interior spaces within the garage.
Yeah.
And then 2 spaces outside of the garage.
2 right outside, okay. So you're talking about the additional 2 possibly being on the southern side where the screening of the arborvitae would be kind of there.
Right, I think there, maybe there's 1 down there and an additional 1 kind of at the end of the drive to the left. But we'll work with staff to make sure that we get the location correctly and we're not causing more issues than we're solving with adding those spaces.
Okay. Any other thoughts from I'll start with Ms. Malala Holly.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just curious to know what exists near the drain area or the eastern end of the property, Building 5, Building 4, eastern end. What is going to be happening there at the end of this parking spot? What would I be seeing?
So that is going to maintain as a natural open space. That is currently correct me if I'm wrong, but the retention area, detention area for the subdivision to the east. So that is going to stay the way it is. We're not going to disrupt
So there is
that.
going to be access to that green space.
Correct.
People can, I mean, not that they will want to walk around, but they will, if they want to, they can just go into that area. The area where you pointed out where the guest parking spaces are going to be, can you tell me what the size of those roads, what is the size that we are looking at? What's the feet there? Because it feels a little congested for me with parking spaces for guests and to and fro traffic, the traffic flow. With emergency vehicles having to come in, making those short turns, I'm just looking at the image right now that's in front of me. What are we talking about in terms of space movement there
From the,
when cars are parked in the guest parking area, basically?
so from the back of the parking space to the back of the parking space, I believe is at least 24 feet, if not 30 feet, right? Let me get up there a little bit. 24, yeah. So the minimum width is 24 feet. So you can see where the sidewalk kind of intersects building 2 and 4, and that little drive lane is 24 feet. So which is a standard two-way traffic width. Yeah.
With the
So
cars parked in that area. That's what I wanted to make sure. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Roche, you had a question?
Yes. So I noticed that on the eastern boundary where you have the detention pond that backs up to the homes to the east, you've used like 3 rows of arborvitae as screening there on the landscape plan. And given that you've got 20 residents on the southern half of this development, that their vehicles will be turning in from Rochester Road and then turning south and pointing again straight through to those houses to the south. Would you consider putting, that kind of, that depth of screening in there? I'm not a fan of walls.
Right, yeah.
And walls are short and expensive and they don't look very nice. But it certainly would be nice if you could provide sufficient screening for what could be 20 to 40 cars that end up
coming down through
there and driving towards that house. I don't know how many will be doing it at night, but by the same token.
Yeah, I think we can definitely take a look at, in that location, providing some additional depth and staggering of the arborvitae to create a denser kind of blockade of vegetation to stop those lights. Yeah, yeah, we'll definitely discuss that. Yeah, yeah, and we will meet the requirement of the 250 feet in addition.
I didn't hear that. You'll meet the requirement?
The 250 feet of screening that is required along that southern edge. We will, right now we're deficient by 4 trees. We will meet that, and we'll look into doing that.
Yeah, just going to say, if you could beef it up to the depth of 3 like you're doing across the eastern boundary for the area where the vehicles would be shining their lights.
I think that's a great solution.
Great. Thank you.
Any more? Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Lambert.
Thank you. Well, definitely carrying on the compliments from Ms. Paracas that this will definitely be an enhancement to that strip of land there. I was curious, from a marketing point of view, what price point are you looking at for these units, and is there a particular demographic group that you're looking at that would probably be purchasing these units?
Yeah, so there'll be market value, kind of with today's kind of climate.
It's crazy days figuring it out.
Right, that's kind of where they have to be. The demographic, I think it's everybody. It's new families, it's single, single people, it's older, generation. This type of product seems to appeal to a lot of different people. So I think there's no, we're not going after just the young worker or whatever, or the 55 and older crowd. It's everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
If the applicant could confirm the square footage per unit, it looks like they're slightly less than 2,400 square feet, but could you address the?
Yep, so it's, each unit is just under 2,400 square feet total. The livable area is around 1,800 square feet, so when you take out the garage.
Very nice. So you mentioned that you may, some of your clientele may be young families. So that said, are there any play structures planned or anything to have the kids have a good time outdoors other than just walking on grass?
Walking through the grass?
Yeah.
At this time, I don't believe we have any play structures planned, but I think as this project develops, I think that might be something that comes up.
Is it going to be managed by the developer or the owner? I mean, is it going to be sold, or what's the?
Sold, yeah.
It's going to be sold. Okay.
Yeah, so it'll be sold, and there'll be an HOA that kind of governs the product.
So these are, each unit's be sold, you're saying?
Correct.
So is there going to be any kind of a cooperative or a homeowners association?
Yep, there'll be a homeowners association.
Okay. Very good. I think they could then, through their
Right,
dues,
they
maybe
could, yeah.
provide something for the kids if the kids
Definitely.
become a
Right.
situation. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other thoughts? Mr. Hudson?
For our city attorney, this plot has EP, environmental. Does that plan permit play structures or that sort of a nature in that area?
So because it's conditional rezoning, there will be an open space preservation agreement that I'll work on with Ms. Mangla. So that's a really good point, because technically, in the open space preservations that I've worked on, the structures are not permitted.
Yeah, well, that was my understanding
So
also.
if that's something that we want to incorporate into the open space preservation agreement, we can do that. But right now, typically, they're not, structures like that are not permitted.
Okay. Any other thoughts before we bring it back to the commission? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
So at this point, any discussion before, or do you want to have a resolution first and then discussion?
Do we have comments?
Pardon?
Do we have public comments?
No, we have no public comment on this item. Oh, we do. We have a public comment. Anyone have any comments from the public? Good.
My name is Jim McCauley. I live at 4435 Harold Drive, just south of this development. I am the Shellowbrook Homeowners Association Community Development Liaison. Basically, anything that's being developed around us, it's my role to kind of look at it and see how it fits in with our community and everything else. I can, first of all, tell you that from the first plan to this plan, we are excited about it, and the fact that this is so much better than what we originally first saw the first time out. They have worked diligently to meet our needs, and we're very satisfied with this. Even to the point, if you, a couple of points that you talked about that we've addressed with them and they've been very open to. If you look at the buildings to the south, and you talked about the headlights going into the southern buildings with the row of arborvitaes there, and then planting a couple trees that will be growing up, and that during most of the time, those will be stopping lights going into the second floors in most places. They've even discussed doing that at the east end by the detention pond, so that way not only do we have the arborvitaes, but we also have the trees, so that way that they don't interfere with that. The only place that you see any head-in parking facing any residential area is by the mailboxes, and that setback from there is so far that that's a non-factor. So everything that we asked for that could be done by their engineer, they did it for us. So from our standpoint, that we're very pleased with it. We like the whole setup the way it is too, moving the one building facing Rochester Road too. So we've been keeping an eye on it also. So thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Anyone else would like to express their comments about this project from the audience? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the table. for resolution. Go, Mr. Lambert.
Just a clarification, I know Mr. Savant was kind of raising his hand earlier, but from what I understand, the EP zoning no longer exists, and so the open space agreement that would be put together between the city attorney and the petitioners, would that be open then to the possibility of having play structures in that area if that's a mutual agreement, or how would that be worked out?
Well, I guess that's what I was trying to say. Typically, we don't allow structures in our open space agreements. I mean, you're right, and it's no longer EP zoned. It's conditional rezoning is what it is, right? So I suppose if this board wants to give me direction to, leave it open in their open space preservation agreement to allow structures, you can give me that direction. But, I mean, my answer still stands. We typically don't put structures there.
Go ahead, Mr. Hudson.
I'd like to comment on that. I recall from our original discussion, be it a year and a half ago, EP, is gone. But the thought, I think, in all our discussions was that was going to be open space. It was not going to have structures in it like all the other open space agreements we had. And I think that we ought to remain consistent with that. It's not a park. It's an open area.
Are we talking, I'm thinking of the area and the...
I think we're talking about the area to the east. Wasn't there a triangle at one point that we were looking at?
Yeah, it's the northeast corner there.
Yeah, so just to be clear, so this whole area is all detention, so there obviously nothing can be in that. So the only areas you could potentially put something in are this small area here or the northeast corner in this section. There's a very limited area to put any sort of structure.
If it is not on the backside.
Okay. Any other thoughts before we bring forth a resolution? Anybody would like to bring forth the resolution?
One thought.
Oh, go ahead, Ms. Malala Holly.
This is to the city attorney. So in the future, if the HOA wants to put a play structure, will they be made aware that something like this cannot come up or exist?
Well, the open space preservation agreement will be recorded, so they'll be on notice through that recording that structures won't be permitted.
Okay, got it.
Joe, I'd like to say something else, if I may.
Go ahead.
To our guest who made some comments, it's really refreshing to hear neighbors on these projects say we like them, we approve them, and we wish we had more. Too often, we get people in here complaining for one reason or another. It's nice to the developer that you've done such a good job.
Thanks for that comment. Very good. Anything else? Yes, Mr. Savanaugh.
Regarding the concern about the headlights to the south, I think that's good input. You'll notice the proposed resolution number 4, provide 4 additional trees along southern property line as per conditional rezoning agreement. You could also, whoever frames the motion could say something to the effect of plus additional landscaping to shield headlights or something like that. Just throwing it out there.
Like it? Mr. Lambert.
Well, I'll attempt to make, with that input from Mr. Savanaugh, I'll attempt to make a resolution and see where it goes. Resolve, the Planning Commission recommends that preliminary site plan approval pursuant to Article 8 of the zoning ordinance as requested for the proposed Shallowbrook Townhomes, 32 units and 8 buildings located on the east side of Rochester, south of Shallowdale, Section 14, currently zoned RT, one family attached residential district and controlled by conditional rezoning agreement be granted subject to the following. Number 1, providing open space easement agreement to the city attorney for review and approval prior to final site plan approval. Number 2, provide required building materials as per the conditional rezoning agreement. Number 3, providing 2 additional guest parking spaces as per conditional rezoning agreement. 4, providing 4 additional trees along the southern property line as per conditional rezoning agreement, along with additional landscape screening to prevent headlights from affecting the adjoining property to the south. And number 5, increase setback along the northern property line to 35 feet as per conditional rezoning agreement.
Second, please. Mr. Rahman? Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Ms. Malala Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Roush?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Savina?
Just echoing Mr. Hudson's comments, Mr. McCauley spent a considerable amount of his personal time acting as a conduit between the neighborhood association and the applicant. Kudos to the applicant they literally went door to door, spent time in people's living rooms. But again, back to Mr. McCauley, he was at the counter reviewing site plans on the telephone, talking to neighbors, talking to the applicant. So a lot of time, a lot of hours spent. So kudos to Mr. McCauley. And also, we strongly encourage applicants to meet with the neighbors. There's been meetings, contentious meetings, where I've sat there, and you remember the meetings where I've said, please have dialogue with the neighbors in good faith. This is what happens when you listen in good faith, and you can potentially make good projects great.
Yep.
So, good job, everyone.
Yes, thank you for that. This is a shining example of how it should be done. Appreciate it. Okay, go on to the next item. These are for public comments on the current agenda. Anything come in over Zoom?
I guess not.
Check with Jackie.
No public comments.
Thank you, Jackie. Mr. Savina.
I want to clarify something for Jackie. Earlier, it sounded like she repeated herself. She claims that she said it once, but the echo was due to Zoom. I don't know if I believe her or not, but I just wanted to state for the record that she said that she didn't say it twice.
Yep, got it. Totally get it. No, I can understand that can happen. I totally get technology.
Blame Dave.
Okay, next item is Planning Commission comment. I think I'll start with Mr. Tagle.
All set. Nothing tonight.
Faison.
Nothing from me.
Nothing. Great project tonight.
I was just going to mention, I'm sure Mr. Savinet will mention it too, that I understand the comment period has been extended for public input on the master plan process, or I'm sure he'll give us additional comments on that.
I'm all set.
I'm all set.
I just want to say that it was a treat to be able to hear that the developer had worked with the residents as much as he did.
Yeah, I would echo that too. It was nice to hear that. I hope we will see more of those happening here in this room. Also, I received an email for the survey, so I was very happy to receive the email for the survey, although I've already completed the survey, but another email came in, so I was very happy to see that. So it's reaching people, so I'm very glad to note that.
Mr. Savinat, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, we had the original deadline of, was it the 18th, 17th?
Last Friday.
Last Friday. We extended it another week because we just wanted to give it one more bump, one more push with some emails, and we've got a couple of social media posts scheduled, one for, I believe, today or tomorrow, and one for Friday, just to give it one more push. We're getting good feedback, but we want to surpass 1,500. Ms. Parakis laid the gauntlet down at 1,500. We want to get past that.
Good. Sounds good. So everybody, you've got 1 week. We want to hear from you. Anything else?
Well, I just want to say we are going to be well over. We're going to be over the 1,500. I can't tell you how well over, but we're at 1,500 now, basically, as of today. So we want to make sure we get that last little push in.
Thanks, Mr. Carlins. Go ahead.
Just one follow-up question on that. So what's the next kind of milestone in the process to develop the master plan after we get the survey results compiled?
So we are going to obviously close the survey out, start tallying the results. We will share that with the Planning Commission at a very upcoming future meeting. And then the next step is we want to hold a joint meeting with the Planning Commission and City Council to go over those results of the survey, help kind of focus some priorities with part of the master plan. And then we're also going to start doing the neighborhood node kind of workshops. We're going to go and start studying those workshops, or those nodes, with the members of the community that can come and walk it with us and talk about issues. And so those are really the next steps for the summer and early fall period.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe as a segue, this joint meeting we're going to have, will that be a separate and distinct one from the one that's scheduled for July 24, 26?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one we actually talked a lot about, whether we should hold them kind of concurrently or have two separate. So they're going to be two separate meetings. The one on the 24th is going to be really training. It's going to be focused on, for lack of a better term, master plan 101. What's a master plan? How do you do it? What's important about it, et cetera, and also with the zoning ordinance. And then the second one, the joint meeting, is going to be focused entirely on your master plan, the survey results, and priorities and goals of the community. So it's first one is generalized master plan 101. Second one's going to be focused on specifically on your master plan and your process.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Go ahead.
So not that I want to extend this meeting, but I'm just looking for, without speaking about this particular project, because we all know we're not allowed to talk about a project after we voted on it, but in general, is there any feedback from planning commissioners about how we did the conditional rezoning this time? Typically, we tie our conditional rezonings to a specific site plan, and this was the first one that I know of, that I've done, where we did not tie it specifically to a site plan. I know we have another one in the pipeline, right? The Livernois project, and I don't know if there are any others. So I'm just looking for some general feedback regarding just outlying conditions, not necessarily tied to a site plan.
Yeah.
Mr. Hunt?
My initial thought is that if you're talking about the conceptual plan that we got, I think most of us get a feel one way or the other when we see that conceptual plan. And then you see in the process goes to the end, it says, well, you know, they're not bound by the conceptual plan. We got a whole different plan here, and that, I'd like to see a little tighter control with that conceptual plan when we're doing this.
Okay. So you like it the old way, where you have a site plan?
I'm sorry?
You like it the way we've done it previously, where you have an actual plan? Okay.
Yeah, so we know maybe what we're looking at.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Tagle.
I don't know that there's one way better than the other. I think a lot of it depends on how much effort is put into the conceptual plan. And then when you come up with a final site plan, you're putting in more effort, or harder site plan, you're putting in more effort to develop it. Tonight we saw an example of an improvement, in my opinion. It could go the other way. You know, so I don't know that, you know, one way is better than the other. So I'm hard pressed to actually give you some solid direction. I think part of it depends on the team, the professionals that are on board, if it's the same professionals or not. So I don't know. I'm sorry, I can't give you any guidance on that.
No, that's fair, and that's why I was looking for feedback. I mean, we spent a lot of time going over, you know, those conditions, and this one became, you know, easier because it was closer in time. You know, approval of the site plan was closer in time to city council approval of the conditions. So conditions were still top of mind, but I can see a scenario where there's a much bigger gap and you have a changeover in team and maybe the attorney's gone and you get, you know, intent gets lost. So I'm just curious.
Well, when we get when we get a conceptual plan, I mean, doesn't it generally have to fall within that, or could they say, hey, here's your conceptual plan, but when we come back, it's a whole new plan?
Right, and that's what I'm saying. So the conditions basically were, they'll have 8 buildings, 3 to 5 units per, and they'll be laid out in a specific format. But those are the only conditions in terms of layout that they were tied to for this particular project, which we're not supposed to be talking about. But that's what I'm saying. Yes, you're right. They could have come back with something that still met within the, you know, confines of the conditional rezoning, but it could have been completely completely different.
This one had potentially more secondary impacts because there's single-family residential on 3 sides, well, 2 that are abutting if you discount Rochester Road. But there could be simpler projects where maybe it's a commercially zoned property and the neighboring property is multifamily and their only concern is we don't want a drive-through, or we don't even care if there's a drive-through as long as the hours of operation are, it's closed by 10 and doesn't open before 8 a.m. Otherwise, we're cool. So I think this was effective. The concept was effective because we started to put together a fairly lengthy list of conditions, and I thought the concept plan did a pretty nice job of kind of illustrating those conditions. It wasn't so simplistic that it was cartoonish, but I thought it was effective. I understand your concerns about more control, but this one worked out better because I think the project was really nice. I mean, it took it to I think a pretty good level. But I agree with John. It's case by case. You need a good team. You need a good designer and a responsible owner and a good attorney to kind of pull it all together. So this is an example of what could go right with the concept.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Did it help out?
Mr. Faison has more, so let's see.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question, and it may not be the same situation, but I seem to recall a situation where and it may have been a rezoning request, where we got a request for rezoning and we saw a concept, but what could be built with a straight rezoning was dramatically different than the concept. So that's a different scenario, right?
Right. Rezonings generally are not tied to a site plan because you can.
I think we were showing, yeah, I'm sorry.
Are you thinking of Tollbrook when they came back with their rezoning?
It was a Big Beaver. Something being rezoned to Big Beaver.
Yeah.
And we were showing something like 2 or 3 stories, but it could have been, much more substantial.
So by state law, you're not allowed to tie any conditions to what we deem a straight rezoning.
Got it.
So it must have been a conditional rezoning. What you'll often happen is a developer or an applicant will come in and say, by straight rezoning, we could build this big a building at this size, but we are voluntarily putting conditions in to only have it be this size. So they're kind of showing you what could be done if it was rezoned versus what they're willing to give up as part of the conditional rezoning process.
Well, I believe what you're referring to is a rezoning application, actually 2 applications that we received, where it was a straight rezoning, no conditions offered. Our application requires that you submit a sketch indicating what your intent is for the property. It's non-binding.
It's not binding.
It's
Right,
non-binding.
that's what I recall.
So I remember for the project you're referring to, and I just want to be careful, I don't want to get into the details here, but I remember having a conversation with the petitioner, like the neighbors want to know what you're proposing. Well, we don't want to submit a sketch because we don't want to do we'll give you a sketch, but that's not necessarily what we're going to do. So it's, the thing about a conditional rezoning is if it's done right, like the project tonight, where discussions are in good faith, the petitioner listens to the residents and does their best to address the concerns. A conditional rezoning is a win-win because there's predictability, there's no surprises. There was no surprises here this evening.
Right.
With a rezoning, without that, there's
Could be anything.
potentially,
Right, and we had conditions that kind of showed us what the form of the building would be, right? So, okay, thank you.
Anything else? Go ahead, Ms.
But
Perez.
just to be clear, I mean, they're going to come back with a site plan at some point.
with the concept, yes.
And presumably, I mean, it doesn't have to, but it should look, not that it should, but it could look very much like what we're seeing.
Yeah, and Mr. Rauch pointed out the one significant site plan difference. It wasn't a conditionally offered difference, so there was a design solution to that issue. So it worked fine. Now, if they would have conditionally offered that the units be located there, that would be a deal breaker. We wouldn't be able to approve it as designed. But it wasn't, and we came up. There was some wiggle room there. There wouldn't have been on the northern buildings, but there was here. So So, and again, in this instance with the concept sketch, it worked because we could come up with a design solution to address the issue through site plan approval.
Anything else? Seeing none, we're adjourned.